is CNN.
The markets have now entered the last hour of trading, and over the last 30 minutes or so, they dropped below 700. Again, that would be a new low for the session. The markets dropped early, and then they came back a bit, and then throughout the afternoon, they've been edging lower, lower, lower. Christine Romans on the floor of the stock exchange joins us. Chris?
Hi there, Aaron. You know, the selling pressure really intensifying here in the last hour of the trading session, and this is the biggest one-day point loss ever for the Dow if this sort of magnitude of losses hold, and this is the lowest level we've seen the Dow since the end of 1998. I want to talk about some of the sectors that aren't doing so hot here. First of all, the airlines, no surprise there, but airline-related stocks are getting hit here overall. You're looking at stocks that are down like Boeing, 14%. That's a Dow component. That's one of the reasons why the Dow is so weak. A lot of people worried that it could see a big drop in orders for planes as the airlines retrench. United Technologies is down 24%. It has a division called Pratt & Whitney, and that makes engines for both commercial and military aircraft. AMR, that's the parent of American Airlines. The parent of United is UAL and Delta, all of them down sharply. Also watching retail stocks here because people are concerned about what it all means for people going to the mall if they're staying home watching their televisions, or if they're concerned about their safety, and if they're frankly grim. Walmart down 1.5 points here. Home Depot, Sears, Kmart, and Target all lower. Defense contractors, though, one of the rare bright spots here. Some of these names are active. Raytheon, RTN is the ticker symbol, up sharply here. Lockheed Martin also higher. Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Newport News, all of them moving higher here. That is to be expected. People have been calling for that for days. You're also seeing some buying in the drug stocks and Philip Morris and the typical defensive names. The question everyone's asking me, Aaron, is this all sustainable, or is this a one-day reaction? But clearly, we are in a tough downtrend, at least for today, Aaron.
Christine, help me with one or two things. In the last hour of trading, I'm guessing here that, for example, the mutual fund companies have some idea of whether money's going in or out. Is this the time they move into the market and will affect the last hour?
Absolutely. It's something we've been seeing for about the last 4 or 5 months. Is the last hour of the trading day is the most volatile because so many people are wondering what's happening in the market even before this. Remember, the S&P closed at a 3-year low the Friday before this tragedy on Wall Street. So the path of least resistance was already lower. People were sitting on their heels waiting to see how the market fared during the day before they got in or out. So this is the same kind of trend we have been seeing. People want to watch, want to see how the market's faring, and then they're going to make their decisions. A lot of folks have been calling for some sort of substantial rally off the low. When you didn't get that, so-called bargain hunting coming in aggressively here, my hunch, and the traders say on the floor, is that people decided they better come in and sell it now.
And they'll see how it goes over the next few days, and then they'll either be buyers or sellers as we go on. But everybody's been saying, Christine, that this is not, well, I don't know that everyone's been saying, but a lot of people have been saying that for a while we're going to see a very volatile market. And,
you know, Aaron, in times of crisis, it has happened consistently with any kind of international crisis. You see a big reaction in the market, and then things smooth out over the next weeks. So people are saying, you know, listen, you got to get back to me in 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Does anybody make money on a day like today?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people have been telling me, listen, nobody really makes money in a panicky market. This is not a panicky market, though. This is an orderly sell-off. There's a lot of calm, and there's a lot of rationale in there today. So it's not panicky, it's orderly. So, you know, somebody might be making money in there, but for the most part, people are just waiting and taking a pretty long-term view since things are so hairy here today.
Well, if they're making money, I'll bet anything it's no one I know. Thank you, Christine Romans at the Stock Exchange. The market, the Dow down 709, so it's up a bit from the lows. NASDAQ, though, also struggling, actually a bit closer to the lows if memory is working here. Senior White House correspondent John King joins us now, and more on what's going on behind him at the White House. John?
Good afternoon to you, Aaron. Well, the president, among other things, of course, monitoring developments in the financial markets. A short time ago, he told reporters, remember, there was a correction, he called it, in the markets even before this tragedy last week in the United States. Mr. Bush voicing confidence over the long run the U.S. economy is quite strong and the markets will rebound. At this hour, the president out delivering a very different message. He's visiting an Islamic center here in the Washington area, increasingly concerned, the president is, we are told, about reports of backlash against Arab Americans around the United States. The president delivering a message this afternoon that even as the investigation continues and of course the focus on suspects of Arab descent, the president urging Americans not to take that out, not to be intolerant against Arab Americans. He's saying most of whom are just as law-abiding as any other Americans. Now, earlier today, though, the main business at hand for the president, military planning, a trip over to the Pentagon for the president. You see him here meeting in the conference room of the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. This session to discuss the call-up of some 35,000 members of the National Guard and the reserves, most of them to be deployed here in the United States for things like monitoring air defenses, and the president also said some chaplains among the call-up in the reserve. Very tough language from the president today, though. Reporters asked him about Osama bin Laden, the investigation continuing, the administration labeling Mr. bin Laden the prime suspect, but the president today, when asked if he wanted Mr. bin Laden dead, very blunt talk from the Texan who is the president of the United States, saying there's an old saying, an old poster you used to see out in the Wild West, wanted, dead or alive.
Osama bin Laden is a prime suspect, and the people who house him, encourage him, provide food, comfort, or money are on notice. Last week, I spoke clearly about our nation's policy, and that is we're going to find those those evildoers, those barbaric people who attacked our country, and we're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to hold the people who house them accountable. The people who think they can provide them safe havens will be held accountable. The people who feed them will be held accountable. And the Taliban must take my statement seriously.
The Taliban, of course, the ruling militia in Afghanistan, where Mr. bin Laden has safe haven. Mr. Bush here shaking hands with members of the armed forces over at the Pentagon after his discussions with the Defense Secretary. The administration continuing a very broad diplomatic effort to build support for an international crackdown on terrorism, a crackdown likely to include, we are told, some U.S. military action. And as part of that effort, the White House announcing a short time ago the French President, Jacques Chirac, will be in Washington tomorrow for some meetings and a working dinner with President Bush here at the White House. Aaron?
In the briefing with Ari Fleischer, he was asked if the president's other initiatives are still on the table, and he rather pointedly said every one of them. Do you see any indication in the White House that any work is going on anything other than the agreeably broad parameters of the crisis?
Not right now, no work at all. The Congress, when it comes back, will deal with this crisis. Additional measures being requested by the Justice Department for counterterrorism efforts. In the short-term, immediate future, don't expect debate on anything else. But the White House message, more of a reassuring message to the American people that ultimately the president wants to return to the debate about the Patient's Bill of Rights, the debate about perhaps additional tax cuts to help the economy. But this is it right now in this town. And at that same briefing, Aaron, very, very tough language from the press secretary. Ari Fleischer asked about the current U.S. policy which forbids assassinations. He went out of his way to note there is an exception for self-defense. Asked if Mr. bin Laden would meet that exception. He refused to answer, but pointedly said again, there is an exception for self-defense. Aaron?
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King. Down on the streets of New York today, the New York Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, and the state's two senators, Charles Schumer and Hillary Rodham Clinton, were again on the site thanking the rescue workers. You see Rudy, everyone calls him Rudy. You see Mayor Giuliani, our apologies, being hugged there and sharing a laugh with Senator Clinton. The mayor has been absolutely everywhere all the time. He was at a funeral memorial for, let me check that. He was at a ceremony for firefighters yesterday. There was really a promotions ceremony. They gave essentially battlefield promotions to some people. And he said, looking out at them after telling the story of his uncle who was a firefighter, "You are all my heroes." It was a very emotional moment for the firefighters in attendance and for the mayor, who hasn't always shown his softer side, but has certainly these last few days. And I have no idea when the mayor has slept. He has absolutely been available and out there, it seems, 24 hours a day. Gary Tuchman has been out there and available about that long as well, and Gary joins us now. Gary?
Aaron, the search continues behind me for the 4,972 people who are still missing, but I want to clear up some information about underground, under the World Trade Center. We've heard a lot about that's where survivors may be. I just talked with a sergeant with the Port Authority Police, and this sergeant is intimately involved with the search. Not only has he been here every day since Tuesday, but he's in a squadron of 9 people, and 6 of his comrades are missing. What he tells me is this: there are 6 levels under the World Trade Center for about 120 feet, each level about 20 feet. But you can't tell which level is which because they have become all squished together. He says they have been able to search some of the area and they have seen no survivors. But they know for certain they have not been able to search all of the area because they can't get to it. If they go from the top, they're afraid that many people on the scene could be crushed by the rubble. It's that precarious. They also tried to get through the bottom, through subway tunnels, but the subway tunnels are flooded, so they can't get through from under, they can't get through from over. It is very frustrating because this particular sergeant I talked to by the name of Antonio Scanella truly believes there could be survivors, but they cannot at this point get to it. So that's the situation we face right now. With us right now is another CNN correspondent, Jason Bellini. Jason has been traveling around Manhattan today as people go back to work, trying to get an idea if it's been a semi-normal day. What have you found, Jason? Have the subways, for example, been crowded?
They've been somewhat crowded, and while all that work is going on back there, people have had this very somber tone about them as they emerge from the subways, most of them for the first time since Tuesday, and they take a look at the wreckage up close. They're getting to see that for the first time as well, and it brings back, for many that I talked to, horrible memories of that day.
I mean, are they able to concentrate on their jobs and their families, or is everybody talking about this?
During lunchtime, I went over towards Wall Street, and many of the people over there went over to the fences and shared conversations about what was going on, and were pointing up at the area where the building was. They can't actually see anything but the smoke, but they're trying to remember where exactly the building was and assessing the disaster back there.
So when you're in other parts of Manhattan, I've noticed being in Midtown Manhattan, which is about 1.5 miles from here, things look semi-normal to me today. Is that your interpretation of it too?
Well, right after you get off the subway, you'll notice there aren't cars around in the areas that are approaching Wall Street in southern Manhattan. These are areas that have been blocked off since Tuesday. And there's construction equipment everywhere. There are these very loud generators. You see cables on the ground. So it doesn't feel normal there in the canyons of southern Manhattan. And people walk out, and with a very when I walked out of the subway with some people, they all immediately stopped. The police were telling them to move, but they stopped and they had to look at the wreckage, which was right there in front of them, just a few blocks away.
Jason Bellini, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We can tell you unequivocally that things are not normal in this part of Manhattan. We're 3 blocks away from the New York Stock Exchange, where people have been all day, but here, this area is still closed to the public. It's all emergency workers and members of the news media. Back to you.
Gary, as you were talking with Jason, I was talking to a friend today and who lives outside the city. It's not just New York that's not normal, or the city. And he was telling me that he tried this weekend to go out and play golf. He played 1 hole and just stopped. It just wasn't fun. It's hard these days to find much fun, at least around here. Thank you, Gary, for your efforts. We were mentioning New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. We expect the mayor to brief reporters again shortly, and when he begins that, we'll go to him, let you listen in on that. If we can quickly go to San Francisco here for a moment, there is that's waiting for Rudy, a memorial service going on in San Francisco now for those who died on Tuesday. You'll recall perhaps that one of the flights was headed for San Francisco, so San Francisco was perhaps mourns a bit more than other parts of the country today.
Let me thank Rabbi Cantor, and of course Meridell and Timothy. Let me welcome all of you
And these are the kinds of ceremonies, vigils, services that have been going on across America, particularly since late last week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Certainly will go on again tonight. The Jewish New Year begins at sundown. The Jewish Americans going to synagogues, and those vigil services will continue. We'll have more talk.